to be able to moderate this conference with my colleague who works for the Gasification Club, and we're going to be managing this roundtable that focuses on green gas. Let's strengthen our synergies. Why this title? Well, because I'm sure, as you know, we talk about all different types of green gas, syngas, pure gas, less pure gas, and so on and so forth. And basically, the power to gas is a theme that is being developed in many different areas. At local levels, it's being developed very, very quickly. Wood is all of a sudden becoming very sought after to generate gas. And within the space of a year, the amount of kilowatt hours that can be produced and injected into the networks potentially has largely increased. So green gas is seen by most of the local stakeholders as being very interesting. And of course, we now need a good, sound legislative framework to be able to develop and commit to the use of this kind of gas. And this is a cause that is supported broadly thanks to European strategies that I'm sure a lot of you know about. They underpin the developments in these sectors, even if there's a massive amount of development. Of course, nevertheless, things will be ramped up over the next few years, and in 2030, 2040, there will be even more support to the gas network. But of course, we believe we need to go faster and further, and so we're working on bringing together synergies to improve performance, to reduce the costs in this sector also, and to guarantee that we can make our planet greener. So without further ado, let me just remind you of a few practical rules. Notably, this session is recorded, so you have the choice of the language you would like to speak in. You have simultaneous interpreting provided in both English and French. So all you need to do is click on the channel that you wish. And can you please make sure that you turn your microphones off for those of you who are not speaking? Feel free to put your questions to the chat, to the discussion, and we will make sure that we serve as a relay for you to propose your different questions and comments to the relevant speakers. And last but not least, please be aware that these videos and the documents will be made available on the Bio 360 site as of next week. So as of now, I suggest that we have a quick look at our schedule for this roundtable, and we're going to see who is going to be present with us. And we're going to have the opening by ATEE, myself and Madeleine. We're going to be delighted to present you with the new Green Gas Let's Strengthen Our Synergies presentation that underpins this conference. We're going to attempt to describe to you the different potential synergies that we have identified, the different ideas, different partnerings that we think could function. And we're also delighted today that we have a certain number of actors present here with us, actors from all of these sectors who will present their projects that they've completed, their initiatives, and the partnering solutions that they have. We have Diane Dufresne, for example, who's going to talk to us. Also, Mr. John Biller from Iremia, who's the CEO of HiMove. He'll be here to talk to us about his projects for producing hydrogen. And last but not least, Nathalie Amiot, who's in charge of the Cometa project for Sitcom, and she will be accompanied by Arnaud Diarra from the SETEC Design and Development Office. And then hopefully we'll have plenty of time for discussion and for questions and answers. And we also will be delighted throughout this conference to benefit from the presence of Mr. Laurent Giraud, who's a member of the Regional Council for the Pays de la Loire, and he's responsible for energy transition, green growth and housing. So he's going to give his point of view, he's going to share his points of view with us and the way in which in his region they bring together all different aspects in terms of green energy. So thank you very much, and over to Madeleine. Thank you, David. Thank you for this introduction. Thank you also to the organisers and the participants of this session. Now, let me first talk about what we do in terms of green gas within our ATEE organisation. Why are we together in this joint session today? Well, since the end of 2019, I'd just like to stress that the Pyro Gasification Club joined ATEE, and we basically bring together all of the different sectors for producing renewable low carbon gas via the biogas clubs, power to gas and pyro gasification. Now, what kind of actions do we take? Well, we no longer work with a silo-based approach. We come together to favour the development of the industrialisation of our respective sectors. These sectors, of course, have been identified very clearly over recent years. They've been identified as being the key to sustainable development, sustainable production methods for renewable gas that is low local and inserted in our local territories. So the basic idea, now that we're all together under the same umbrella, as we say, is to have discussions on a regular basis to share our experience, our business activities, notably for a sector that is basically entering into the industrialization phase, such as pyrogasification, um, that requires a lot of research work currently. We wanted to identify common challenges, um, and common directions that we're looking to head in. And of course, we wanted to create potential synergies and partnerships between our different subsidiaries. Of course, there are lots of complementary areas. We'll try and demonstrate this today, but we realized that it was possible to capitalize on eco products, technologies, where not only can we develop in parallel, but we can also sometimes develop conjointly so that we're able to guarantee that 1 + 1 = 3. So initially speaking, we decided to publish a document. This is called Green Gas. Let's reinforce our synergies. I will send you in the chat a link that will enable you to upload a WeTransfer and see this document. It will be available on our website by next Monday. Our site is not available at the moment, but will be by Monday. Why did we publish this document? One, to state how important gas is in the French energy system, green gas in particular, but we also wanted to say gas needs to be decarbonated as quickly as possible, and all of the different sectors need to work on renewable gas production. And we particularly wanted to stress and talk to you today about the possibility of developing these synergies, these partnerings that enable us to capitalize on our know-how, to reduce our costs, and also walk forward in rank and file to develop all of our know-hows for the future and enhance our performance. So basically, that's the reason that underpins this publication and this discussion. So we're not going to enter into too much detail, but we'd simply like to say we all have a specific DNA in our club, which is that we all speak together and exchange our ideas. And that is the aim that underpins this whole session for today. So to continue, just a few reminders regarding the different sectors. We have 3 production sectors for renewable gas, low carbon gas. The first one, of course, has been talked about in great detail in France. It's methanization. This, as you know, is a way of transforming the product by downgrading organic matter via the microorganisms that produce energy, in other words, biogas, and also a form of digestate that then makes it possible to um, permeate the soils. So this gas can be consumed locally for producing heat or electricity, or after cleansing stage can be used to produce gas that is very close and similar to methane, natural gas that is already used, and hence it can be injected into the different infrastructures, the gas infrastructures that already exist.
Ensuite, un petit rappel sur la
Next, just a
pyrogasification.
reminder as to what we mean by
Rapidement, pour résumer
pyrogasification.
un petit peu par
We're going to
rapport
be
aux
brief because I know
différentes
we've talked a
études
great deal
récentes,
about
la
this today.
pyrogasification, c'est un traitement thermochimique qui permet de
Pyrogasification is a
convertir
thermal
des matières
and chemical
carbonéreuses qui
process
vont
that
très
makes it
sèches
possible to convert
substantiellement
organic
dans
matters that are
différents
relatively
degrés de
dry
cuisson
into different
selon
energy
les besoins. Donc,
components
encore une fois,
that come in
les
different
proportions vont
shapes and
varier entre
forms.
plusieurs
They
traitements
vary
selon
depending on
ces
the
matières.
process
Et donc, une
and the
fois
raw
en solide,
material.
donc
You
un
can have a
char ou un
solid
biogaz,
format, we
une
say a
forme
char or a
liquide ou
biochar, a
liquide,
liquid
puis des huiles, une
form,
forme
in this
gazeuse,
case
c'est-à-dire
oils,
avec
and a
synthèse
gas
principalement
form,
constituée
syngas
de gaz
notably,
gaseeux, de
made
CO2
up
et
of
de méthane.
CO2, methane,
Donc l'idée, ça va être
and the
d'avoir
first one
créé des
that I've now
matières
forgotten.
complémentaires à ce qu'on
So
va demander
these
en
are
méthanisation. Donc on est plutôt
all
sur des
used
matières un
potentially
peu
for
sèches, ligneuses,
methanization. Here we're
qui
talking
viennent
about
aussi de l'agriculture, c'est
ligneous raw
gazinification.
materials
Et puis
that can
également des
come from
poussières
all
un peu plus
types of
complexes,
farming,
donc
and
tout ce
also
qui est
waste that is a bit
arsénique-vert.
more
On peut citer
complex.
notamment
Carbon
des
waste, we could
déchets
notably
de
refer
matériaux
to
d'ameublement
boxes
ou encore des
and
déchets
waste from
pneumatiques comme des
furnishing,
combustibles solides de
or
régénération. Donc ce sont des déchets issus de chimie,
fuel, for example, solid
préparés sous des
recovery
formes
fuel. And
facilement
the idea is to
réutilisables.
bring
Donc
together all this
ça
raw
peut être
material
des
so that it can be
bioactifs,
used
arsénique,
for
méthane qui vont
recycling. It
être
can be made of
synthétisés.
biomass, plastic, or a whole
Donc
range
merci
of
pour
things
cette
that can be then
explication. D'abord,
used in the
on va
system.
juste parler
For
un petit peu d'un
pyrogasification, we
traitement
make a
en
distinction
acide
between
industriel qui va
pyrolysis, where
fonctionner
there's
sur
no
3 phases, et ensuite la
oxygen. You can enter
gasification
into these 3
qui va
phases,
lui
and then you have the
permettre en fait
gasification,
de constituer un
whereby
gaz
we add
liquide
a small amount of antioxidant, which in the vast majority of cases is made up of air. And this in turn, well, it could be CO2, water, steam, and oxygen, but we'll talk about this. And this gasification agent will maximize the capacity to convert the entrants into syngas. This syngas then can be used in several ways. First of all, it can be used directly, for example, for producing heat and or electricity. For example, you can replace fossil fuels directly in industrial processes, or you can add cleansing bricks, and after the syngas has been treated, you can produce methane that could be injected into the network, as you saw in the previous session. So you add the methanization layer that enables you to convert the syngas into a different product. And then you can go through an additional cleansing stage and use the hydrogen that you're able to produce for all kinds of uses. This is something that was presented this morning. And then you've got a whole range of other sectors for biofuel that are gradually
Et
coming
donc
to the
je
fore
crois
and
qu'il y
direct
a
and
Fanny,
developing their products.
membre de cette
Fanny,
compagnie
the third
gallo-allemande,
member of
qui
this
voulait vous poser
renewable
quelques
gas
questions.
sector is what we call the power to gas.
Contrairement aux deux
This,
premières qui s'appuient
contrary
sur
to the
la biomasse,
first two
il
that
souhaite
rely
que
on
le gaz
biomass, the
s'applique
power to
comme
gas
un liqueur à
relies
titre
on
électrique.
the
Donc il y a
electric
différents types de
resources. We've
production
said
électrique et
there are
notamment
different
des énergies
sources, different
renouvelables
ways of
qui peuvent être
producing
mixées
the
au
electricity. You
pétrole,
can
au
use
carbone. Et donc après une étape
solar panels,
d'électrolyse,
for example,
grâce
and
à
after
l'électricité, on va
you
obtenir
use
dissocier de la
electrolysis
molécule
in
d'eau
water,
pour
and hence you
obtenir
use
de
the water
l'hydrogène.
molecule to then produce
L'hydrogène
hydrogen.
va
The
pouvoir être
hydrogen then in
soit
turn
utilisé
will either be able to be
gaz
used
locaux, notamment
directly
pour des
for local
industriels qui
uses,
visent
for
à
example, for
décarboner leur
industrialists who are
consommation
looking to
d'hydrogène plutôt que de
decarbonate their
l'ajouter sur
current
la
use of
mobilité, notamment
hydrogen,
en
or
mobilité,
for
l'électrification
mobility,
d'agriculture.
heavy duty
Et une
vehicles,
autre
for example, that
praticité
deliver goods. And
également
another
est
way
de
also
valoriser dans les
is to
infrastructures
valorize or
existantes
recycle in
gazières, et
current
notamment en
structures,
mélange
for
avec
example,
le gaz
to
naturel
mix
ou
the
avec le
product with
méthane,
natural gas or
venir
biomethane,
injecter
and
une
hence
part
you're able to
dans les
inject a
carburants
part of the
de la
hydrogen
consommation actuelle du
into
gaz.
the
Donc,
current
on
gas
va pouvoir
consumption
la
process,
combiner
or
avec
alternatively, you
l'énergie
can
hydrogène
combine
avec une
it,
étape complémentaire
combine
qui
the
s'appelle
hydrogen
méthanation,
with the
méthanation qu'on appelle aussi
biomethanation
méthanation
approach,
pyrolysique, et
biological
avec
biomethanation, methanation or
dioxyde de
methanization.
carbone et liquide
And
hydrogène, on va venir
with this
recombiner,
hydrogen, you can then
reconstruire
recombine it
une
and
molécule de
rebuild
méthane,
a new
méthane
biomethane
qui va du
molecule
coup être
that, of
facilement
course,
intégrable
can
et
more
stockable
easily be
par
included
les
and
infrastructures
assimilated
gaz
by
et
different
ainsi que
gas
par l'ensemble
infrastructures,
des
and of
consommateurs
course by all of the different
et clients
consumers
raccordés à
and
des infrastructures
clients who
existantes.
hooked into the gas
Un
network.
autre vecteur qui
Another
est
vector
important,
that is
même si
also
ce n'est
important,
pas un gaz
even if to
liquide,
a
c'est le
certain
CO2.
extent it is not gas that
On a la
you
possibilité
can use as a
d'aller
fuel, it's
capter
CO2. We have the
avec
possibility of
le dioxyde
capturing
de carbone ou le gaz
carbon
de fumée
dioxide
industriel ou
in
même en air,
industrial
et
fumes in
également
the
les
air. And we
méthanisation
also have the
sont
possibility of using
un
it via
suppositeur
methanization in order to
de dioxyde de
produce
carbone
carbon
biogénique
dioxide,
vivant,
biogenic carbon
et que l'on va
dioxide
pouvoir
biomass.
utiliser et
So we can
valoriser
gradually use it,
dans ces étapes
valorize it
de
in these
méthanisation que
different
l'on voit
stages, these different
à la fois dans les
methanization
diverses
stages that you
applications
can see
technologiques
in the production
et dans les
solutions for
filières d'activité.
pyrogasification and in the shorter approaches that we've described. Now, to continue with our publication that you can discover, I've sent the link to you. We'd just like to remind you of the different types of potential that you have for these three sectors in terms of what we can produce. The results, of course, people are quite familiar with. This was a study by the ADEME in 2010 that highlights a certain number of scenarios that mean that we can have a 100% renewable gas mix by 2030. Here we look at the primary resources that we need to use in our local areas, and we also need to see what the outlook is for dropping, reducing the consumption of standard gas thanks to the use of renewable energies. So all of these different scenarios have been identified. We say that thanks to these scenarios, we have approximately 620 terawatt hours of primary resources that can be replaced by renewable gases. In other words, there's no form of competition between the different types of raw materials that are used. We said it's important to take into account sustainability issues, protecting the soil, protecting the forest, and all of this means that the different sectors have to be able to capture all of the raw materials, the biomass that they need to be able to function. On the screen here, you can see the potential for each sector is 140 terawatt hours for methanization. That's what would be injected into the networks, 180 terawatt hours for pyrogasification, and 140 for power to gas. The basic conclusion conclusion that we draw, generally speaking, is that the resources are available in our local areas, and at the current time we have ample raw materials to be able to replace all of our fossil gas consumption by natural gases between now and 2050. Just one point, the local areas, the territories have bought into this scenario. They believe in it, particularly Nouvelle-Aquitaine, that has studied this study and has analysed its own local situation, and they've come to the same conclusion as us. So we believe that by 2030, we can have 30% of these renewable gases, and by 2050, 100%. And when it comes to the network gas that we can gradually cease to use, we'll also be able to develop renewable gases to replace the products that we use, for example, in our haulage vehicles, all of the fossil fuels that we use at a local
Et
level.
maintenant, on passe un peu à la nouveauté,
Now,
qui est
let's move
vraiment
on
mettre en
to
avant
what is
notre
new, what we
communication
really want to
et ce que
highlight
sont
in
les
this
synergies
publication.
entre nos
Is the
territoires.
existence of
Et
synergies
voilà,
between our different
pour
sectors.
commencer,
And
c'est-à-dire que
we
nous,
have this
on
clear
est d'accord en
ambition
fait que les
to
efforts
bring
ne
together our
suffiront pas
different
suffisant.
stakeholders,
Nous
and
avons
you'll
une
see that
synergie
it's
entre
already
la
underway.
bonne communication et la
Synergies between
pyrorésification. Alors tout
methanization
simplement,
and
vous en parlez précédemment, déjà en
pyrogasification.
amont, on a une
As I said,
stratégie
already further
d'implantation qui est
upstream, there's a
en
great deal
termes
of
de ressources
complementarity between these
pyrogasables.
sectors
Donc la
in terms of
méthanisation,
the
en fait, on
resources
se
that we
base sur des
use.
molécules humides.
Methanization uses damp
Pyrogasification, naturellement, c'est
resources,
une
whereas
pyrorésification qui est
pyrogasification
plutôt
uses
sèche et
linear
donc qui est
biomass,
sur des
dry
sèches
raw
de déchets
material,
dont je vous ai
and
parlé.
other dry
Donc il y a une
materials
vraie
such as the waste
complémentarité
that I
là-dessus
described.
et on
So a
a
great deal of
souhaité développer
complementarity and
voilà,
many
des unités
opportunities as well to develop
qui sont
specific production
localisées
units
au même
that are
endroit
located
mais
in the
qui vont
same
vraiment
place. And it's a
maximiser
mix
la
that well and
valorisation
truly
des
will
déchets
enable us to
pyrogases.
maximize the
Par
recycling of the
ailleurs,
local
il faut
waste.
bien évidemment
Moreover, I'm sure you're
différencier
well
entre les
familiar
options qu'on a
with
aujourd'hui,
certain
qui aujourd'hui
co-products that
se
can be
planifient
used.
plutôt
These
sur des
co-products have
éphémères
to
en
be
retour au sol,
valorized
en amont
mainly, and we have to
résiduel.
guarantee
Mais
the
dans
return
certains
to
cas,
the
on
earth.
verra
But in
notamment avec
certain cases,
l'État,
and we'll see
volonté
this with the
d'instaurer
Cometa
l'acquisition
project, the
sur
return
des
to the earth
emplacements
is
sur
difficult for
lesquels il y a
regulatory
des
reasons
essais.
due to
Et
the
là, le
quality of the
traitement par la
digestate
chimie va
sometimes,
permettre
and the
de
thermochemical
valoriser
treatment
ces états
processes will
en
make it possible to
maximalisant sa
optimize these
conversion en gaz
digestates
renouvelable.
and to guarantee that they
Voilà,
can
ce qui
be
va permettre
converted into
d'un coup,
renewable
maximiser
gases,
la production
and
de
hence
carbone, mais aussi
we'll be able
réduire
to convert
l'impact
them into these gases
des
and
résidus
reduce the amount of
finaux,
residues, the
donc
final
gaz à effet de serre.
residues
Si tu veux
that
préciser peut-être ce que
previously
c'est
would have
pour
been sent back to the earth.
pyrolyse,
So
gasification,
you've got the
méthanisation
pyrolysis
et
and
thermate,
gasification
un petit peu
methods and
via
biothermal
l'automatisation.
methods that have been presented this
Dans
morning.
deux petites synergies identifiées,
Now,
qu'on a trouvé très
two
intéressantes, donc c'est
synergies
la
that we've
pyrogasification et le
identified
power to
between
gas.
pyrogasification
Déjà, on a
and power to
mutualisé la
gas. But
technologie de
first of all, the
méthanisation et la
mutualization or the
pyrogasation
pooling of the
pour faire en commun
methanization
ces
technologies.
conteneurs
Basically, these
et
two
avec pour
sectors
lesquels
can
les
come
coûts
together,
les coûts
and
de
hence
recherche
the
doivent
cost
être
of the research
différemment
work, all of the
mutualisés.
research efforts can
Également,
be
l'idée
pooled.
de valoriser
Also, we
ces
have this
renouvelés
idea
aujourd'hui
whereby we say
qui sont
oxygen from the
forcément tenables,
electrolysis
éphémères,
process has to be
forcément
optimized. It's not
d'approvisionnement
necessarily always the case.
insuffisante.
People
On
say
peut
we've
tout à
got
fait imaginer
sometimes not enough of
basculer
this
vers
product. So why not
des
imagine,
techniques
and we've done this
extra-purifiées
via the
qui vont
eMove
venir
project that we'll
valoriser
present
le
afterwards,
système
why not
d'électrolyse en
optimize the
l'utilisant
use
comme
of
agent
the
réducteur
oxygen from
de gasification.
electrolysis by
Donc, ce qui va
using
nous
it in the
permettre plutôt
gasification
d'utiliser l'air
process?
pour utiliser
So
des
this means that
combustions
instead of using
régulières,
air, we
va
use
nous
the pure
permettre
oxygen
d'obtenir un gaz de
directly
synthèse
that
à
enables
effet
to
sérieux
obtain
qui va
syngas,
réduire les coûts en termes
and
d'investissement
we can then use
et le
it
gaz donc
for
ne
processing for
pourra
everything
pas
that we need
ne
to
pourra
do
pas
within the
ne
scope of the
pourra pas polluer.
process, and there won't be any nitrogen.
Et enfin, donc, dernier
And
couple
last but not
en
least, the
question
last
de gaz
partnership, let's say
renouvelable
the
à faible
last
empreinte
couple in
carbone,
this renewable low
la
carbon
filière
gas
méthanisation
energy
slash
mix,
production
it's
de
the
gaz et power
methanization
to
and
gas
power to gas
avec aujourd'hui deux
area.
couplages
And here we
fondamentaux
have
qu'on a
two
identifiés
forms of coupling that
qui
we've
est d'abord
identified that seem to
l'injection
work. First of
d'hydrogène
all,
issu des
the
électrolyses
injection of
dans un
hydrogen
réacteur
from the
de
electrolysis
méthanisation.
into the
Le
methanization
méthaniseur
reactor.
dans ce
Um,
projet est
the
alors
methanizer in this
un
project
vecteur
is then
de
used as a
méthanation
reactor,
biologique.
biological
C'est-à-dire que
methanation
les bactéries
reactor.
du
In
réacteur
other words,
vont vraiment pouvoir
bacteria from the
consommer
reactor well and truly
ces
get the
carburants afin
opportunity to
d'optimiser
eat up this
la
fuel in
production
order to
du méthane
optimize the
pour
production of the
produire encore
methane,
plus de méthane
and
de synthèse.
hence it means even
Et
more
enfin,
syn-methane can be
on l'a
produced.
vu, un des
Next,
coproduits de
we've
la
seen that one
production
of the
de gaz par
co-products
méthaniseur,
from
c'est
producing gas
bien
in a
sûr le méthane,
methanizer, and
mais
of
également
course
le
the methane, but
biogénique.
also the
Et donc,
biogenic
le synergie
CO2.
biogénique rentre
Biogenic CO2
dans la recette pour produire du
is
méthane de
part of the
synthèse
recipe to
avec
produce
l'hydrogène. Et
synthesized
donc, on va
methane
pouvoir
along with
produire et
hydrogen. So we're
valoriser
able to
tous
produce
ces
and
deux
optimize this
issus de
CO2,
méthanisation dans une
this
culture
biogenic CO2 from the methanization,
avec de
in
l'hydrogène
order to
liquide
then
et
combine it
liquide.
with the products.
Voilà quelques idées.
So
Comme
those
le
are
disait
just a few
Madeleine,
ideas,
c'est absolument
as
pas
Madeleine said.
forcément exhaustif.
Obviously, this is not
Il y a
necessarily
forcément d'autres
exhaustive.
idées, d'autres
I'm sure
innovations
there
qui
are other
travaillent
ideas other innovations, other R&D work that is designed to develop additional synergies and coupling between different green gas sectors. But these are the ones that we had in mind and that we wanted to share with you specifically. Basically, it's a whole range of synergies that we encourage all of the different actors in our sector to study and to work on, whether it's in the research or the development sector. The aim being to optimize all of the green gas sectors. It's about pooling our resources on the one hand, but it's also about pooling all of the co-products, the byproducts that we can produce thanks to our biogas setups, and also all of the technologies. The technologies basically offer us a whole range of ideas, directions to head in for future developments, and they all offer a massive amount of potential, we believe, that need to be explored by the actors, alongside, of course, all of the work that is already currently underway and that is designed to improve each of these sectors at an independent level. So following on from this publication that we've gone into detail on, of course, we'd also like to illustrate with a certain number of examples. As we said in the introduction, there are a certain number of actors who've already thought about this coupling process and who've already implemented tangible projects. So we wanted to start out with an initial illustration, thanks to the coupling between the biogas sector and the power-to-gas sector, with the Hyconase and Methicenter project. And we're delighted to have Diane Dufresne from Storengy with us. Diane is head of projects for Storengy, and she's also responsible for two specific projects, the two on the screen. And so over to you, Diane. Please feel free to go into detail on your project.
Merci David, j'espère que vous m'entendez.
Très bien.
Thank you, David. I hope you're all able to hear me. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you about our two projects and the steering or the management carried out by Storengy and why we're present on this market. And we're going to be talking about injecting synthesized methane into the natural gas networks. So thank you very much for your introduction and for having invited me to present these projects. We at Storengy, we are gas storage specialists. This is basically our main profession. We have 21 storage sites, underground sites in Europe. And these storage sites are all part of a network. We are the operators of these 21 storage sites, and we guarantee a balance in the case of a peak period, a peak cold period, thanks to our networks. And Storengy basically is extremely interested in getting involved in the energy transition phase as being excellent at storage, gas storage specifically. And we're working on developing a lot of green gas storage possibilities within this context. So basically, we make our industrial know-how available, our capacity to develop new projects, our capacity to manage underground sites as well, and our capacity to become involved in energy transition projects. And as such, we're currently developing a certain number of projects in the hydrogen sector for producing syngas as well. And also we're looking at geothermal solutions because we have a lot of possibilities in this context in underground areas. Now, why power to gas projects? Well, if you go through the history of the energy mix, we realize that today we are seeing more and more renewable energies that are being introduced to the French network, and these new renewable energies that are gradually coming to the fore, well, it all means that we need energy storage solutions. Why? Well, basically because the renewables don't function in the same way as our traditional energies. We depend on the wind, we depend on the sun to obtain the energy that we need, and yet the usage is exactly the same as it has always been for the end user in their homes. So energy storage is suddenly the missing link to the chain. And it's very important, obviously, in the context of the energy transition process. This is what enables us to round off what's been said in terms of the energy mixes by way of introduction. Storing energy, it's something we're seeing that is very important. And in the right-hand graph, you can see all of the different solutions that are proposed. We always tend to think about batteries. That's always top of mind. And then you've got what we call the compressed air storage solutions and the pumping of water that is stored in the hydroelectric dams. These are the three elements that are very visible, and we see that they do not have the same usage at all. Because when it comes to the volumes that can be stored and when it comes to the storage times, batteries obviously do not meet the requirements at all to respond to the same problems as storage that we're able to do from a hydroelectric perspective. So power to gas, to come to power to gas, is a solution that enables us to store a massive amount of energy, and we're able to store this energy for quite a long time. And this is a service that we could then use. The network could benefit from the flexibility of the gas structures, and this will help us in terms of the gas and electric energy mix. So within the scope of all of this, we're currently developing power to gas projects, and we believe in the virtues of the coupling of methanization and methanation. And in fact, this coupling enables us to make the carbon yield of biogas much more positive. Notably, when you enter into methanization, you produce a biogas. It's a combination of CH4 and CO2. The purification systems enable us to create biomethane, mainly with CH4, and the CO2, generally speaking, is siphoned off, or rather what we propose with our power to gas solutions is to recuperate the flow of CO2 in order to methanate it with hydrogen so that we create synthesized methane, and we can even methanize all of the CO2 from the methanization process, the aim being to achieve a situation whereby you can guarantee efficacy in terms of the carbon yield of up to 95 to 97%. Then after that, we produce synthesized methane and biomethane together, and these will be injected into our networks. I'll show you the different projects and possibilities for injecting into the network a bit later on. In addition to this, the system enables us to develop the production of local hydrogen. And at Storengy, we do believe in the development of territorial hubs, hydrogen territorial hubs, notably with this coupling process between hydrogen and CO2 at a local level. I hadn't quite finished and my slide has been moved on. So once they've been converted, these different types of energies can be carried to the natural gas networks without any cost whatsoever, no cost in that you don't have to adapt the network because the synthesized methane is in line with the specs for the natural gas network and can basically be injected, no problem whatsoever. So let's move on to the next one.
Projet, alors Méticentre en premier et après Iconé, parce qu'en termes de temps, c'est Méticentre qui a commencé son développement en premier. Ce sont deux projets complémentaires et de différentes échelles. Alors Méticentre, c'est un projet qui est en Centre-Val de Loire et il est associé à notre site de stockage de Céré-la-Ronde. En effet, ce projet émane du site de stockage. Et il propose d'installer, en plus du développement d'une unité de méthanisation de petite dimension, un électrolyseur de 250 kW et une méthanation catalytique. Alors l'ensemble méthanisation produira 50 nanomètres-cubeurs de gaz vert, donc 100% vert, puisqu'il s'agit de biométhane et de gaz de synthèse. Alors, la part du gaz de synthèse...
So the share of synthesized gas is very small, but the idea is to experiment with the solution and to have visibility in terms of the optimization of the different flows. In your introduction, you talked about matches or couplings, and I think that this is an advantage for methanation, because we're optimizing our different gas flows and input-output flows. So for the METI center, the methane and syn biomethane are produced at the same time. They're injected into one station, one GRDF station. Our partners are industrial integrators, and we're also working with Prodival That's for the separation stage, with Chemot for the methanation, Arriva H2Gen for the electrolysis. The CEA is helping us with the integration and the optimization of the system, as well as with the development of research and development ideas for new membranes for second generation PEM electrolyzers. So CL is our local partner. It's the energy authority in the area. So it's an interdepartmental authority. It promotes green mobility in the area. And as well as having a power-to-gas unit and a methanation unit, we've also got a hydrogen distribution station for mobility purposes. And we've got the support of the Centre Val de Loire region authority, and we've got a partnership with a farmer. So we've got subsidies for the development of research in this area. So thanks to ADEME and a European fund as well. So this is a project that will produce three green gases: biomethane, syn-methane, and hydrogen. So it really is a gas hub that we are developing near Céry-la-Ronde. Now, for Haïkonné, this is the Bourgogne-Franche-Comté region. It's a demonstrator this time that is not working on methanization, but it does have a power-to-gas unit that is a retrofit unit that can be associated with the production of biomethane that's already on the site. It's also a unit that's interested in biogas from DSDND, ISDND, which is a dangerous waste center. So the idea is to produce biogas with the purification of the biomethane production, and it's Wega Energy that's in charge of that. On this site, we'll add a 1 megawatt electrolyzer that will be able to absorb any variations in the production of electricity. So up to twice its capacity. And there will be biological methanation. That again, the idea is to be flexible so that we can meet the need for renewable energy. We're also working on a match between renewable electricity and regional wind energy. So on the Coved site, we produce between 150 and 200 nanometers cubed of biomethane. That's already being injected into the gas authority network. We're going to add 50 nanometers cubed of green synthesized methane so that it will be onto the same network but using a different station, a different injection system. So we've got European funding. We also work with others. We use with Electrocare for the methanation. It's developing methanation with our research and development center, the Engie Center, that is. Then there's Engie Green that's in charge of developing prediction software. It's based on renewable energy. The idea is to set up the electrical production system with the power-to-gas system. And then we have other local partners that are helping us with the power-to-gas unit and especially the integration of the project. And then there is the University of Franche-Comté. The university is in charge of carrying out studies on the optimization of the system, and then the regional authority is also helping us. So with the regional help of different entities and our local partners and national partners, we can develop a regional sized project that is beneficial for local production. So Store Energy is coordinating the design and construction of technological bricks making sure that everything can be integrated and coordinated through operational tests. The idea is to develop industrial pilots so that we can test feasibility and make the system as competitive as possible so that it is flexible and so that we can produce a commercial and industrial offer at the end of the day. So what about the challenges of the power-to-gas projects? Well, the idea is to associate the production of renewable energy with the operation of the electrolyzer and monitoring and prediction technologies for load profiles, because of course this requires the optimization of hydrogen production and green hydrogen production. So renewable energy production, it's all about understanding intermittence and optimizing hydrogen production. So that's the low carbon flexible production side of the project. Power to gas services can take on network services, and the flexibility can be adapted to methanation systems to allow for greater flexibility and to make it possible to produce the syngas and use CO2 for the production of local gas and have more green methane being produced. So the project is associated with the production of hydrogen for mobility purposes at local level. And we want to make sure that this is as competitive as possible. So it's important to have the right kind of integration, and we're working on all of the technological bricks: electrolysis, methanation, methanization, and filtration of the gases. And this is going to make it possible to have something that is that can be replicated across Europe. So the definition of renewable gas status is a good question. Synthesized gas, synthesized methane has no status when it comes to injecting it into the network. And so we're working with GRDF onto how this new gas can be accepted so that we've got a clear regulatory framework and so that we could inject it into the network and sell it. So the objective at the end of the day is to have a system for converting electrical energy, so low carbon electrical energy, into a gas vector so that we've got something that's flexible. The gas matrix is flexible, and so that we're supporting the idea of energy transition. Thank you, Diane. Thank you for presenting these two projects. We can see how important they are. There are lots of different opportunities. We've got some questions in the chat as well. I'd like to thank participants for using the chat, for asking their questions. So there's a question. We've seen that you've had support from ADEME and the European Investment Fund. So this is for the injection of gas into the distribution network. We don't have a price for the moment. This is a subject that we're trying to deal with. We work with our sponsoring authorities for setting up some kind of price for the experimental side of the project. So we want to experiment and optimize the system, but we don't have a price yet. Thank you very much. But we're working on that. Yes, I expect the whole sector is working on it. Perhaps we might have an exceptional price to prove the optimization of the system so that we can make the syngas as competitive as possible. Coming back to the question of cost, what about production cost for this syngas for the two projects? Well, this is a very good question. So we're talking about pilot projects for research and development purposes. Our objective is to have a production cost that is competitive, that is as close as possible to the production cost of biomethane. Today, if we take all of the project costs and look at the research and development we want, the cost would be very high. But if we just look at the cost of the installations and we look at possible optimizations and look at the revenue, the potential revenue from network services, revenue from heat, we can optimize the cost and reach a cost that is close to that of biomethane. But we're still in the pilot and experimental phase for the moment. Very good. So a question, no, this is a question that I'm asking concerning CO2, biogenic CO2 from biomass. What is the advantage? What is the difference with respect to using CO2 when you're capturing it in industrial zones, for example? For example, there's a project in a port area. Is there a specific advantage? Well, that's a difficult question. The difference is mainly that the carbon used in that case, that carbon would have been emitted by the work on the biomass. So it's carbon that comes from the biomass, it's emitted by the biomass, whereas the CO2 that comes from industrial fumes corresponds to a specific kind of human activity, and that contributes to the greenhouse gas emissions. So what has been set up? Well, apart from the technical side, focusing on pollutants from the fumes that can be problematic for the system, and the overall situation in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, the Power-to-Gas project works in spite of all of that. Thank you. Thank you very much for your answers. So I suggest that we move on to the second example with the HyMove project. Madeleine. So we're going to hand over to John Bier, President of IREMIA and HyMove. This time we're going to hear an example of synergy between power-to-gas and pyrogasification. So it's where hydrogen biomethane are being produced based on wood waste. Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Good. So I'm going to present to you the HyMove project. HyMove is a company that was created at the start of the year. The objective, our objective in the long term, is to produce hydrogen from Class B wood waste. So we started with an observation. In France, if we talk just about our own country, we bury 1.3 million tons of wood waste a year, and that's not taking into account the wood that goes off to other countries to incineration plants or other processes in different countries. So this question of burying has an impact on the pollution of our earth and water resources. And of course, there are greenhouse gas emissions that are created by this storage. So we've decided to act. At the same time, we want to make it possible to produce a local renewable gas. So our mission is to produce eco-hydrogen based on wood waste. So we talk about eco-hydrogen. Why? Well, the idea behind that term, well, it's kind of play on words, if you like, because we can talk about the circular economy. We're talking about waste that is going to create value, that's going to produce a local renewable gas. And then there's the notion of ecology, the environment, the fact that you're using a wood waste, therefore we're conserving the natural resources of the forest. There's the notion of economy, because of course we have to have a business model, a viable business model. So it really is all about having a local loop and having a circular economy. You start with the waste, you produce hydrogen, and if we push it even further, we can even say that this hydrogen or this synthesized biomethane can be used to feed, to fuel a fleet of vehicles. So we're using wood waste to produce fuel. So that's the idea. So it's a project that was, well, it's a company. HiMove was created in cooperation with IDEA. So we've got a 50-50 share in the company. IDEA has 1,500 employees with a very large revenue. I've got a very small activity with 15 or so people, and we make 4 million euros. So we're not talking about the same scales. So, however, we do share the same values, co-enterprising, services to human beings. So we agree on these things. And being co-enterprising in this kind of area means that, you know, each of us brought along some essential bricks. In my activities, I already treat and create value from waste, from pallets for playgrounds, for example, for energy. I'm familiar with the question of what to use, what to do with Class B wood. And I have 4 or 5 years of experience in Pyro Gasification, but I was more of an OEM. I was more in the R&D field, designing Pyro Gasification units. So I've suggested this project to the IDEA company. In fact, what I wanted was 1 or 2 partners with a certain amount of credibility, financial capacity compared with other partners, given the amount of investment required. I wanted somebody interested in this kind of technology. And it just so happened that IDEA, among its different sites, has an old industrial site, a brown site. It's a Seveso low threshold site with the GRT and GRBA network not far away at the periphery. So this old brown site was going to become an industrial park. So there was a photovoltaic station. There's a methanizer that's being built. We're going to set up our biomethane production unit. We're also planning the second unit that will be designed for 100% hydrogen production, and then there's another gasification production, hydrothermal, all of this on the same site. So, of course, we're studying the synergies that can be possible in order to create value from the CO2, the methanizer. We want to increase our CH4 production, of course. Why not supply heat to the methanizer? Why not supply hydrothermal gasification with the, and then there's the char that comes from that. So the objective basically is to maximize and optimize possible synergies between the different projects on this site. And all of this will allow us to benefit from a showcase that we can then use in the future. So our organization, we're in department number 44. It's a company with its own equity, 200,000 euro. That's the equity that we start with. The support that we have comes from the Pays de la Loire authority. There's also BPI France. Some things have been validated, but we're still waiting for some other steps. We're getting different support. And then there's GRDF. GRDF, of course, that's the network chosen for the injection for technical reasons. So GRDF, that's the network chosen so that we can inject onto it our synthesized biomethane. Now, talking about our process, the strategy proposed and adopted, well, we're not OEMs, we're not involved in R&D as such. We're not OEMs. We want to be positioned as producers of biomethane, biohydrogen, so syngases. So the strategy was really to look at assembling ready technologies, and in this way, very quickly have access to the market. So that's why we've got technical partners as part of this project. So if we can go back a little bit. So our first unit. So as it says, an industrial demonstrator for the injection of synthesized methane by pyrogasification of wood waste. So you've got a photo here that shows us the eco park in Brittany. So our objective is really to work in two steps. The first step will involve accessing the market quickly, providing proof of concept. We want to have quick access to the market and inject our synthesized biomethane onto into the network. And as Diane was saying earlier on, like everybody else, we have to have some kind of exception from a regulatory point of view so that we can inject the biomethane from things from other processes, not just methanation. So we have the same problem today. There's no price, there's no rate that's linked to the buying of our gas, and we're currently working on that. So the exception for the injection into the network, that's been validated. We're allowed to do that exceptionally because there's a project that was launched at the end of 2020. So now we're just adding the final touches to our business model for the sale of our gas, but there are still discussions from that point of view. The first step, so well, there's one unit to produce 100% of synthesized biomethane, and at the same time we're beginning to look at hydrogen uses within the group idea that's involved in logistics and transport. And we're also going to work with local authorities and other industrialists. The idea is to look into other uses, other hydrogen needs, so that we can set things up after 18 months or 2 years, so that we can set a second unit up on the same site designed to produce 100% of hydrogen. So we don't know whether we'll be able to inject that into the network, but hopefully it will be able to be used by industry for decarbonation purposes. So how do we work? So our choice, our technical choice was to work with a gasifier based on oxidation. So it will have pure oxygen going into it rather than air from the ambient atmosphere. So this means that we have a gas quality that is really top level. So the gas coming out of the gasifier is really of high quality. And then we combine the gasifier and the electrolyzer so that at the end of gasification and the water gas shift, we've got enough hydrogen molecules so that we can enrich our CH4 in the methanation unit. And after the electrolyzer, we can have oxygen that is a residual product of the electrolysis process so that we can feed into the gasifier. And of course, this depends what we want to do, whether we want to make CH4 or hydrogen. It would work differently according to what we want to produce. And then if I want to create value from all of the CO2 from my gasifier, maybe I'll reduce the quantity of wood coming in and increase the power of my electrolyzer so that I no longer have any CO2 at the end. So we can see how we can optimize the model. We can study that further. So the calendar. So we're a very young company. It was created in January 2021. So I talked to you about the start of the project in December 2019. In 2020, well, everybody is familiar with what happened. There was quite a bit of a disruption. But for a project like ours, there were in fact some accelerating collateral effects, let's say. From an administrative point of view, there was a lot of work to do. And we had to be very good at what we were doing in order to move on to the next step. So we decided to create the company. We started our feasibility study. So it's like a preliminary study, if you like. So that was end of February. So it will take 3 months, and we'll have all of the economic, technical factors, environmental factors, so that we can have everything we need to describe the project, where it's going to be set up, the environmental protection file, and then we'll move on to investment. And of course, we need to think about how to sell our gas, what price. And then hopefully in 2022, we'll be able to start construction and commission the plant in 2023. Thank you. I finished. I hope I was clear. Thank you, John, for that very clear presentation, very comprehensive. So I have a question. What gasification technology are we talking about? So it's an IFIX co-current system. So we're still defining things, even if there are some things that are emerging. We haven't yet made the final decision about the kind of gasifier that will be used. Can you tell us what the overall power is? Well, we're talking about 4 to 5 megawatts for gasification, and we should be producing overall between 4 and 500 nanometers cubed of gas, and that's the output. I have a last question. Can you just go back over the readiness of the technology, all of these technological bricks? What is ready? What is not ready? What is innovative? So what is innovative is the notion of this assembly, assembling these different technological bricks. So that's quite innovative. The most mature technological bricks are the gasifier, the electrolysis side of the process, the gas purification side of the process. And after that, we're looking at bricks that are still fairly innovative. There's the methanation process as well. We're not talking about things that have just come out of the lab. We're talking about technological bricks that have proven themselves. Thank you very much, John. Thank you for your presentation. David, if you would like to introduce the next speaker. Yes, we're now going to move on to the third illustration of synergies between the gas sector. So, Mr. Laurent Giraud, we can see you. You're with us. So he will be giving us his point of view later on. So he will be our major witness. So the third presentation, so we'll be talking about Cometha, the project Cometha. We'll be hearing from Nathalie Amiot, who is in charge of the Cometha project at the SICTOM, and also Arnaud Diarra, who is the project engineer and who is providing support to the Cometha project. Yes, hello. Hello, everybody. So the Cometha project that we're going to be presenting today with Arnaud Diarra is a public operator project company in the Paris region. There are two skills here that are completely different, and the approach, I would say, is local. The idea is to develop a renewable energy, whether we're talking about the local climate plan, energy plan, or whether we're talking about sustainable development objectives that are more worldwide or linked to the 2030 agenda. So we wanted to be part of this dynamic movement with an intersector-based approach, an approach looking at research and development, looking at new solutions, and working with two major public entities, one for SIAP that focuses on wastewater treatment, and then SICTOM works with waste, household waste. So two different types of skills, but two skills with common characteristics. We've got resources, organic resources, and the idea is to treat these at the best cost. So to offer better service for our users. The idea was also to meet a challenge, a climate challenge, but also with the idea of working in a smart manner. So how to co-build a local project that would take part, contribute to the energy transition objectives without creating fossil fuel. So for us, we want to try and work and find a tool or some kind of treatment process that will allow us to create new innovations and be able to treat this mix of inputs with common characteristics. And we're talking about a liquid waste and also a solid waste from bins, because we all throw things away uh, in spite of our efforts. So the idea is to have a synergy between these two institutions, these two entities, but also working with these two organic resources that we have. So the two public operators worked on a model, a treatment model to try and rise to all of these challenges and meet expectations.
And obviously what they want to do is focus on this waste from bins. Why? Because it's potentially a resource that is rich in carbon, and this carbon, we believe we can convert into as much gas as possible, green gas, as we've been saying. And this gas needs to come directly from the methanization process or from different pyrogasification processes. So my name is Arnaud Diarra. I'm head of the project called Project Cometha, and so I work alongside with my colleagues at the SICOM. We've been asked to work on this project because we have a lot of references in terms of methanization and retreatment of sludge from wastewater treatment plants. We've worked with several towns and cities around France. And within the context of this project, we're working with Natalie and the people from the SAP in organizing and steering this project, in validating the deliverables. We were also the guarantors of the technical quality, in charge of administrative and financial follow-up, and we guaranteed that there was very close cooperation with the different communication staff, the legal staff, and also the innovation-focused people who in particular were helping us to focus on some of the major challenges in this project. So the Cometa project, as I said earlier, we have two state-run entities with different types of waste, solid waste and liquid waste. And so the specific feature here was to be in a position to have waste that is highly representative of our needs, our current processing and treatment needs, and the same for the future. What we want above all is to have a combination of these different entrants, whether it's from a percentage term or in terms of the typologies, the different types of waste. The underlying issue was to achieve better performance and also to ensure that we would have a good mix, a balanced mix of entrants that would enable us above all to head towards producing local energy, renewable energy, thanks to this waste. And also what we wanted was to ensure that we'd be able to recycle this raw material and recuperate the nutriments. This is very important for the SIAP because we want to avoid a situation where our water contains a lot of pollutants. So the Cometa project, as you've seen, it has a whole range of entrants, organic fractions, residual fractions from the sorting of household waste, also manure, and for the liquid part, it can be the sludge, as we said, from wastewater that has been treated, and also grease from wastewater plants. And we believe that this combination of entrants was very likely to enable us to have a favourable result in terms of energy efficiency. We wanted to demonstrate that 1 + 1 was equal to more than 2, that it could be equal to 3 or 4. In other words, this combination of entrants treated together, and on top of this, a lot of these entrants are very similar and share the same characteristics. We believed we could achieve a better yield and a better performance than if we processed them and treated them separately. And this was one of the points that was very important, I would say, when it came to defining the specifications, the fact that we wanted to demonstrate the relevance of having mixed entrants, and we also wanted to be able to use innovative solutions. So we were going to use existing processes, but we wanted to have new technologies that were ready and available so that we could rise to a certain number of challenges that we suspected we would come up against. One of our objectives was to have a mixture of entrants, as we've said, and to produce a lot more methane than if we treated them individually. But it was the technological contribution, we believe, that will enable us to have this enhanced level of production. Also, what we thought was, okay, our initial standpoint is to say that we're going to work with a mixture of entrants, with entrants that are considered to be less noble, let's say, than pure biomass. Here I'm talking about this waste that hasn't gone through a methanization process. It could be hay, wood residues. And we were saying, no, 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 we're going to work with waste that at a current time is called into question and is not seen as being a positive or good product. And we wanted to say, no, we don't necessarily want to return certain types of digestate to the earth. No, we want to be able to take all of the carbon that is in this digestate, and we want to be able to convert it as much as possible into gas, green gas. And we want to be in a position to produce and make the existing networks even greener. On top of that, the fact that we can come up with processes that enable us to work further on this digestate, it means that we can come up with even more byproducts than we would have imagined without the technologies. So to cut a long story short, another one of our targets in this partnership, it was to say, well, okay, the more you add machines and types of equipment, well, the more energy you're going to consume. So we wanted to make sure that our treatment plant or our accumulation of different technologies also had a carbon footprint that was going to be very, very limited. That was important in the context of our innovation partnership. It was a target that, okay, wasn't maybe the top target, but it wasn't far behind. The aim was to evaluate what amount of energy each different technology was going to consume. And also one of the ambitions that we have within Cometa is to be in a position to assist in the development of new sectors, but also to be able to develop and help in the experimentation process, to help research work, and also help different stakeholders that aren't necessarily used to working together to do so. Lots of big companies, getting them to work with startups, with SMEs, to work with academics. So basically the aim was to make sure that all these actors could come together around the same table. And you'll see this a bit further down the line. I think we have been successful. We've got all of these actors to pool their resources, and we've just learned so much. Yes, absolutely. I can confirm. The first time that I heard about the Cometa project, I was told that it was the project where everybody had gained something from it. And it's true, there are so many stakeholders and actors that worked on Cometa. And now that I'm well familiar with the methanization sector, I can say that yes, it definitely was beneficial to all of the people who work in this sector. And notably, it's the case also for the pyro gasification and methanation sector. Right, this being said, obviously the question is, what are the ideas that Cometa developed? Well, the main stages are listed here. Natalie's gone into detail on these to a certain extent. The initial question was the synergies that were possible regarding the entrants. The dry matter ratio sometimes is quite high, so it makes the methanization process a bit complicated, but it made the project more interesting. Then you've got all of the waste, the liquid waste from the waste treatment plants that can sometimes be more expensive to process. So the initial investigation that was carried out regarded the preparation, was in relation to the preparation of the entrants. and the different biochemical stages were entered into. Next, there was quite a lot of work that was done on the methanization as such and on the transformation of the carbon, because this is the major challenge. We tend to talk about the Cometa project because initially speaking, we thought that we'd have the methanization stage and that it would be vital for converting the carbon, whereas in fact, the carbon that we're talking about is carbon that can be downgraded biologically. Next, you've got the digestat treatment process using pyrogasification. These are thermal heating processes. Here we attack the carbon that is a lot more difficult to deal with. And this is where there's a true synergy. And I really do stress this because it's one of the major challenges today. There was great synergy between these two phases. On the one hand, the methanization, where we're focusing on the carbon that is easy to break down, and it doesn't take too long. And next, for the pyrogasification stage, here it was much more important to have the carbon chain that lasted for a lot longer. So you couldn't have broken down this carbon simply through the methanization process. Sorry, I've been a bit long-winded here. So the basic aim of this thermochemical chain is to, or one of the objectives, the major objectives, is that given that we can't return the products to the soil and we've got high volumes of residue, we need to work on recycling the gases that are produced. Notably, some people proposed methanation. And when it comes to the liquid phase and the ensuing treatment, during this phase, there were still nutriments left. And so we couldn't return them to the soil directly, return the digestates to the soil. But this meant that we worked a great deal on recovering the nutriments and notably the nitrogen and the phosphorus.
Vous pouvez passer à la slide suivante. Donc, je vais vous présenter maintenant la phase 1.
Here you have the first phase. During the first phase, the aim was to take samples and do tests in the laboratory, because Cometa is made up of an innovation partnership, and so this means that the project owner has to specify what they want, and then we make sure that we invent everything that is necessary. So we had to create the solution required for the treatment, and so a certain number of stages had to be entered into. A certain number of trials needed to be carried out on the different parts of the treatment process until we had an overall process that was basically compiled for all of the different stages. And for this, there's the initial stage whereby we had to gather the samples and characterize the entrants. After that, the different candidates all defined their treatment or processing system to meet the targets that Natalie presented. Then we set out an experimental protocol, because obviously one of the challenges we were up against was that we had to treat all of the candidates in the same way and enable them to be able to compare the results that they achieved. Then the different candidates carried out the tests in the laboratories. Then work was done on the intellectual property, because we're looking to bring innovations to the fore. So of course we have to then work out who these different innovations belong to, where the intellectual property lies, both for the candidates and also for the project owner. Next, once all of these tests and trial processes had been carried out, the candidates had to come up with a pilot project and explain what the deliverables were for the first phase, and this is what they was judged on to see whether they would continue into phase 2. So we provided them with support and help to select the different groups for the second phase. And as it happens, we chose 2 groups to continue through to the pilot phase, and we chose the different sites for the pilots that were then going to be put together. Now, just a quick focus once again on the solid phase treatment, because I'm sure there are quite a few people around the table who are very focused on pyrogasification and its challenges. As I've already said, and Natalie has said this as well, right from the outset, we decided that we didn't want to return the digester to the soil directly, mainly because of the changes to the legislation in force in this area. And so these are the solutions that the different candidates came up with. Concerning Suez, they came up with full pyrolysis. I'm avoiding the drying part. They had full pyrolysis at 850 degrees centigrade and biological methanation, methanization in order to optimize the production of biomethane. Next, for Gicontilia, they had the first stage of the preparation phase using hydrothermal carbonization and then gasification of the hydrochar and also biological methanization.
And so for the next one, we wanted gasification with supercritical water, so producing clear water and brine. And for the last one, John Cockerill, we're looking at dehydration, high temperatures. This is the process that was chosen for phase 2, but we also tested torrefaction. So this means that we're now at phase 2, but there's a point that I forgot to mention. Cometa is part of a procedure that's referred to as the Innovation Partnership. This means that we have a kind of a breakdown of the project into 3 phases: research and development, that was phase 1, phase 2, design, build, and operation of 2 pilot units, so industrial units, that is. And after this phase, so phase 1, there were 4 entities working competitively. Phase 2 meant that we were able to select 2 companies out of the 4. So we looked at the criteria, we looked at the objectives in order to do this, and following phase 2 that we're going to detail, there is now the possibility of pursuing things into phase 3, making the industrial unit, so choosing one of the 2 entities that you can see now on the map. So once we selected the 2 entities, we wanted to decide where to install the pilot units. There are 2 sites that were selected for this. One to the right, so the Seine-Valentin, with different partners that you can see listed. They are going to be building and operating one of the pilot units, and then a second pilot unit that's going to be built and operated in Seine-Gazien in the Yvelines area. And we'll have Gicon and France Progaz working on it, and with other partners that you can see listed. So we've got 2 European groups, Franco-European groups, one that's Franco-German, that's for the Gicon, Tilia, and the other John Cockerell, which is a Franco-Belgian group. Now, concerning the pilot unit in Seine-Grésillon, this is going to be built by the Gicon Tilia group. As I've said, it's a treatment process with different types of equipment. As explained already, you will have seen the block diagram earlier on, giving you all of the different phases, the different steps for this treatment process. Today we've got solid and liquid waste that's going to be mixed so that we can have methanization with a dry operation. So after the methanization, you're familiar with the process now. So it produces biogas. And for the gassy part and the solid part, there's a digester that is produced. As already indicated, we've got a mixture of inputs, so the waste can be considered as polluted. So we decided that we weren't going to put this digester back into the ground. And so we wanted to have something innovative, an innovative process, so that we could transform all of the carbon present in the digestate into a gas, if possible, a gas that might create value in the long term. So this digestate in the pilot unit will be dehydrated, dried, so it will be decarbonated using heat. This will produce 2 types of residue, a solid residue, so the hydrochar, and a liquid residue that's rich in nutrients. So concerning the solid residue, the hydrochar, that's going to be dried, it's going to be crushed, gasified and the gasification process. Well, there are two processes that we're thinking about at group level. So it's going to take place at 900 degrees. So this will give us quite a good mix in terms of hydrogen, CO2, richness, and carbon monoxide and water vapor. So that mixture is then going to be enriched again as part of a water shift process. It's going to be enriched in hydrogen, and it will then be sent to a methanation process at 55 degrees in order to produce a maximum amount of synthesized methane. Concerning the liquid effluent, well, the phosphorus will go through an electrochemical process or a chemical process. There are two different processes that are going to be applied to recover the phosphorus. And concerning the nitrogen, there will be just one process used, and that will be an addition of different reagents. So that's it for the pilot unit in Seine-Grésillon. For the Seine-Valentin pilot unit, so that's the Franco-Belgian group. So unlike the Seine-Grésillon unit, we're talking about methanization, a liquid methanization. As you would have understood, there are different inputs. There's sludge, there's the organic fraction, and depending on the quantities that are going to be mixed, so the four entities had worked on different quantities of inputs, and so they had defined either dry or wet methanization. For Saint-Valentin, it's definitely a wet process that's being used, and the entity decided, the organization decided that because of the biochemical reactions that you can have in each reactor, that well, that these reactions could take place in one or two reactors to have better decomposition, and the group worked on a bi-stage, a dual stage reaction. So two types with circulation of digestate, so producing even more carbon through transformation. Bit like all of the other processes, there's a drying part, so that you've got a dehydrated digestate, a dried digestus that's then going to be used in a 900-degree pyrolysis system with oxygen and production of fumes and gas, and then a liquid part that's going to be based on stripping. I've finished. So just the time scale. So with the different phases, the number of organizations that are going to be kept for each phase, and the calendar for phase 2, because we are in charge of design, construction and operation with the organization, and then 2 additional years to test new inputs or different quantities. Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalie. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for that very comprehensive presentation. We don't have very much time for questions. Time has ticked on, but I'm going to hand over to Laurent Géraud, who has now joined us. So welcome, Mr. Géraud. Thank you for being with us. You're a member of the Regional Council for the Pays de la Loire. You're in charge of the environment, energy transition, green growth, and housing. So, well, all ears. We are looking forward to hearing what you can say about the development of green gases in regions, and to hear about applications of what we've been talking about today. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I'd like to say hello to Paul, and well done to Paul and his teams. It would have been lovely to be there together, because it's a trade fair that is growing. It shows the quality of different regional projects, this trade fair, and the ambition of companies when it comes to gas. So in a fairly difficult context, I won't go into the details, of course, but given this difficult general context in the region, I preside a commission, and there are a certain number of other colleagues So French regions believe in gas, green gas, in a context where there are questions. The ambition of regions, especially when it comes to gas and green gas, has been confirmed in most local authorities. In the Pays de la Loire, this is what we want, clearly. Our conviction is that the energy mix is what will allow us to reach the low carbon objectives and energy transition objectives, and therefore fulfill our commitments. These commitments require tools that need to be set up, and that's what I understand from the panel discussion. There's the ambition in terms of transition, but there's also something else that needs to be taken into account, the regional ambition in terms of economic development, in terms of training, in terms of transport and mobility, and in terms of use. So this is the first call that I would like to share with you. It's highly technical. It's very important that you give meaning to what you're doing. It's very important that we write the story together, write the story of green gas. So I've talked about decarbonation, I've talked about positive energy, and then there's the question of storage and the energy transition. So if we can work together intelligently, smartly, have the right solutions for gas transport, at the right mix of energy. So it's important to have experimentation with synthesized gas, so synthesized methane. So we have a role to play at regional level to support you, to work with other organizations, the ministry, provide exceptions when exceptions are required. So this is really just to say that the tool, these are the tools that we're trying to set up. We're trying to set up tools to support you as part of our development policies. So you need to be supported by authorities, but also companies can provide their own support. There are other entities, other stakeholders. We've heard about these in other sessions. Basically, there is this energy challenge, but there's also the innovation challenge, a very strong innovation challenge, especially in the long term. We need to think about the question of green gas. Now, when it comes to synergy, we can see that there is already synergy through the different uses. There's the smart energy network called SMILE. This was only open to electric networks to begin with, but there is the same challenge for gas. So the idea is to have 30% green gas between now and 2030 in the Pays de la Loire. So this is the movement that we are seeing emerging in our region. But we are very much open to experimentation, to innovation. It's very interesting to see the possible synergies and synergies in terms of the, possibility that we have of pooling our resources and setting up, exceptions, exceptional authorizations when necessary. So you've got your job, and we're there to help you, to support you, so that gas has a role to play, green gas has a role to play in the energy mix in regions. So I'll finish with one point that seems to me to be important, and that is the question of uses. We're very much focused, aren't we, on production? But we need to put that into perspective. We need to look at the production challenges, distribution, transmission, and use. They all need to be taken into account to give meaning for the gas policies. Other sectors have been able to do this. Perhaps gas hasn't done this enough. So that's something that needs to be developed further. And unlike other alerts, other warnings, that may have emerged. There are a number of planets that are aligning, I would say, that are coming together. There's the setting up of the hydrogen plan that's being supported by the Pays de la Loire, that is acting as a driver in this area, and then hydrogen at national and European level. So the whole gas sector can be impacted, I believe. I'm seeing that the projects supported in terms of financing are midterm or long-term projects. They're there to help the industrial ecosystem. The business plans are supported by use of hydrogen at some point or another, whether we're talking about production or use. So this is an opportunity for the entire gas sector to position itself in the long term. The financing is there. And all of the regions, all of the authorities, all of the entire industrial ecosystem is focused on this topic, and there are possible synergies between conventional sectors and those that are currently emerging and that are promoting the hydrogen challenge. So this makes sense in what we're doing in terms of mobility, for example, land mobility. So we're working in our region on maritime mobility, on rail mobility as well, and air mobility. So this is a considerable challenge. It's a considerable challenge for industrialists in the sector in terms of production and use, and in terms of a kind of a slogan for Europe or Europeans, 60, 70 billion. Oh, sorry, in terms of currency as well, in terms of the euro, whether we're talking about gas or electricity or whatever. Investing in our area means that we've got lots of euros, billions of euros to spend. So that's what I wanted to say. It's a very positive sign in a complicated context for some, but I believe very much in the gas sector, and I have colleagues in other regions who also believe in this sector. I'm convinced that next year we'll be able to get together in Nantes with all of the stakeholders from the gas industry. There'll be increasing developments in terms of synergy. I'm sure of this. There will be demonstrators. We've seen them. We've seen different projects, and we need to be able to see these more. So synergies will help us to set up the right business models and adapt them according to needs. So if I've understood what John was presenting, that's why we went to support what was happening. There's methane to begin with, and again based on waste, on using waste. And then in the medium term, there's the emergence of hydrogen with a real challenge there linked to the industrial model. So once again, thank you. I think we can have some time now for questions. I'm sure that there are many people around the table who have questions to ask, but I just wanted to share with you the commitments from regions. In the Pays de la Loire, we have our commitments. We believe in of diversity of energy and in these things that you have presented. Thank you for your encouragement and your support. The stakeholders of the green gas sector, I'm afraid we won't have time to have the answers and questions, but we will continue to keep in contact. But of course, it is very important to work on this diversity. We've seen already many economic aspects. So we've also seen the technical aspects. It's important to work on regulations as well. It's important to have public support, public policy support. And at the start of as the sector is emerging, we need that support. We need to control development, to master development, and this is also important for the future as well. Thank you very much to everybody. Can I remind you of our publication? Please download it. So it's in the chat. The link to the publication is in the chat. Thank you to all the speakers and see you very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.